What if you could predict that your book was going to fall apart or fail before you even started writing? It would be fantastic to have a crystal ball before you even start writing your book to be able to say, I don't think this book is going to make it, or I don't think I'm going to be able to finish this, or pretty sure readers aren't going to like it. Every time I start a book, I think it's going to be a piece of crap. There are no books, absolutely zero, out of the 85 I've published and the 100 or so that I've written, where I thought, this is going to be amazing. Everybody's going to love it. It's going to be awesome. Because part of what makes me a writer is I'm insecure about my work. I think that that is something that goes along with every creative. Creative fields and insecurity go together like peanut butter and jelly. So boom, just accept it and keep going anyway. Because we use that insecurity, doubt, and anxiety inside ourselves to push ourselves to be better. But there is more to it. Sometimes you are doing things or writing about things that are not going to work, or that are going to paint you into a corner, or might fail as soon as you release it. And notice I said might, because there are outliers in every single industry. And just because you take a chance doesn't mean it's going to fail. But you do want to set yourself up for as much success as you possibly can. So let's talk about the 7 signs that your book might fail before you even release it. Number 1, your niche could be too small. Now, if you followed social media marketing or marketing at all in general, then you know you have to have a niche, a little corner of the market that is just yours. And it is great to have one and great to know where you sit. I figured out mine by deciding what I really, really wanted to write about and what was important to me. And that is like small town, contemporary, family, love, relationships. That's sort of my niche. Regardless of whether I'm writing romantic suspense, romance, women's fiction, or horror young adult, they're all in that same small town, contemporary, love, family, relationships category. Now, if your niche gets way too narrow, then sometimes you're not going to have a big enough audience to read the book. As long as the characters appeal broadly. Because when the characters appeal broadly, the readers will buy in no matter what. I'm not a huge fantasy fan, but I have loved The Lord of the Rings and The Rings of Power and The Hobbit and all of those movies because I love the characters. And there are a lot of genres that I have read that probably weren't something I would have picked in general, but I loved the characters and I loved other books by that author, so I picked them up. So what it comes down to basically is having relatable characters. The problem is, a lot of people create unrelatable characters. There are characters. We love them. We want them to succeed. We want them to be better than life. But that makes them less connectable to the reader. So, okay, great. You're saying, how do I make them relatable and still make them people we can root for and still have a plot and still create a niche big enough? I know it sounds like a lot to worry about. And in a way, it really is. Because there are a lot of moving parts when you write a book. It shouldn't be easy and straightforward. So let's start with just the character part. Relatable characters are characters who are imperfect, just like the rest of us. And it's hard to admit that you're imperfect. It really is. Anybody who's been on social media for more than 5 seconds knows that the second you show a weakness, the hyenas are right there to jump on you. And so being vulnerable as a person is super hard. Every week I come on this channel and it is just as much of a struggle for me to share what I'm vulnerable about as it is for you to share it on the page. Vulnerable and fallible characters, which are relatable characters, come from you being vulnerable and fallible on the page. It means digging in deep into the emotions that you may have felt when you were younger or when you're anxious. The feelings of abandonment that I felt as a child of an alcoholic are things that I deal with all the time on the page. I don't necessarily create a lot of alcoholic scenarios in my books, but I do deal with that feeling of disconnect, that feeling of solitude, that feeling of abandonment. A lot of my characters, if you analyze my books really closely, have those feelings, have those insecurities. And that is what drives them to push other people away and to not get super vulnerable when they're talking to other characters. Whatever feelings you're having going on inside of you, other people have too, and they will relate to those feelings through your characters. Along with that, the third sign that your book might fail before it even starts is not having an emotional journey for the character. This requires going another step further, not just having the character put those emotions on the page, but deal with them. Confront them, overcome them, face all those things that they're afraid of. I use Shrek a lot as an example because most of you have probably seen it, but Shrek does not want to get hurt by other people. And if you don't ever get close to other people, you don't have to get hurt, right? So what does that plot make him do? And what does he have to force himself to do over and over again? get close to other people in order to achieve his goal of getting his swamp back. So that's what you want to have with your characters, that emotional growth where they gradually have to keep facing those things that they are afraid of. If you don't have that on the page, then the reader's going to feel kind of ripped off, like, okay, so this character is just as screwed up at the end as they were at the beginning. They didn't learn anything. Why are they walking off with the $1 million and the pretty girl? The reader wants to see that the character has earned that happy ending. What that creates is the fourth thing that I think a lot of people are missing, and that is high stakes. A lot of writers I talk to think high stakes is like stopping the bomber from blowing up the big building or stopping the alien invading force from taking over Earth. Yes, those are very high stakes. But really, the best high stakes are the ones that really matter to your character. So if you look at what is important to your character, and this is something I've talked about in many other videos, when you take that away from them or you threaten that, you create high stakes. So you can have the alien invading force taking over Earth, but you want your character to be fighting against them because he wants to protect his family or his home or whatever is important to him. You want it to be about much more than saving the world at large, because narrowing it down to something specific makes it more relatable to the rest of us. A vague, big concept like saving the entire world is not as important as saving that little corner, because we relate more to the little girl standing on top of her destroyed home with a damaged teddy bear than we do to this aerial footage of a hurricane zone, because we connect with the individual person and what they have lost or what they are trying to achieve. Even if you analyze movies like House of the Dragon or Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or any of the big blockbusters, yes, they were about that entire world, but more what everybody related to was that individual character and what was important to that character. They wanted to see Harry overcome so that he could rescue his friends, not necessarily rescue all of Hogwarts. It's about what Harry did for that small little world of his own that is important to him. As we're coming to number 5, I hope you're seeing how this is all going together. Having characters that are relatable, that face their fears, that have emotional growth, and that have high stakes for whatever they are trying to achieve. Also, by its very nature, creates a more dynamic plot, one that has a rising arc of stakes and things getting worse because the character has to continue to grow and the character is continuing to take risks. That naturally feeds into a plot that keeps the reader turning the pages. And having that plot is number 5. If you don't have a really good plot, if you have nothing happening in the book, then the reader is going to get bored pretty quick. We don't want to read a bunch of people sitting around thinking about what they should do. We want to actually see people do stuff. So a plot full of backstory or thought or narrative is very flat and not interesting at all to the reader. And you got to remember that your reader has a lot of things vying for their attention. Netflix and Prime and Disney Plus and HBO and TikTok and Facebook and all these things that move very fast and keep the action going. That's what you have to do on the page too. I'm not saying you have to have a car chase every 45 words, but you do need to have things continually happen in the book and the character going after something on every page. And then you run into number 6, which is conflict. 99% of the writers that I work with in my consults don't have enough conflict. You need to have it on every single page of the book. And I'm not talking about it just external conflict like roadblocks and detours for your character on their journey. I'm talking about the emotional stuff. Look at how that all interlocks. The character has issues, they gotta face them. That creates conflict, raises the stakes. All of it comes together. So when you've got all that on the page, your book doesn't fall apart. Your book doesn't fail. It keeps going. So how do you know how and where to put conflict in? Luckily, I have a video on that. I have a masterclass on scenes where I took a scene and I tore it apart and I showed you exactly where all of the conflict was and how I wove it in. I highly recommend studying that and then go back to your book and look at where the conflict is. If it's there, and if it's not there, then you're going to need to add some. Look at how you can weave in more. You've got to have a broad enough story to appeal to people, characters that are complex and complicated and layered, and a plot that fits those characters where things continue to happen and get worse and the character continues to take action. And then you have to have really strong writing. If you're just breezing through it and not really taking the time to work hard at the words, then you're not delivering the experience that the reader really wants. And what I mean is that you're probably telling a lot. Show not tell was the hardest thing for me to learn. It really was. It took a long time for me to figure out when to show, when to tell, what the difference was, how to know what I was doing, because I came up with lots of pretty words, but I didn't necessarily have them in the right place. You want to really draw the maximum emotional bang for the buck in the places of your book that really matter, where that character is confessing the secret that they've kept hidden for all their lives, or where the stakes are super high and the character has to risk everything to save their family member, or where the character is finally facing that demon deep inside them that they have not faced all this time. Those are the places where you really want to put that emotional hammer down and show instead of tell, and not let the page be flat. Let it be dynamic and interesting and beautiful and have really strong words. I have a lot of videos on show, not tell, and I also talk about it briefly in the masterclass on scenes. But think about where you're at in your book, and is this a place where it really matters for the reader to pay attention and you really want the reader invested? That's where you put your effort. That's where you really work hard at bringing those emotions, those fears, those doubts, and those beautiful words to the page so that the reader is engaged. That's probably the top thing that will make your book fall apart: a lack of engagement. And all of these 7 factors together are what create an engaging book that readers connect with. It doesn't matter what genre you write. It doesn't matter if your characters are 60 or 16. All of these other parts will make the reader latch onto your character and care about them. Because what makes readers connect with a book and talk about it and tell all their friends has very little to do with the genre, the character, the setting. It's really all about that emotional connection. Emotional connection is what gets us to remember a book. So if you can work super hard on that, you will create a book that will succeed no matter what. And if you want more on how to analyze your scenes and turn them into blockbusters that will really keep the reader hooked, look at this video here.